Today, we are going to discuss one of those topics that once you see it, you just cannot unsee it. As the title suggests, we're going to talk about building a lean and mean team that is perfect for helping you accomplish your real estate goals. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about a concept that is truly revolutionary, the concept of unique ability. If you can build a business around this concept of unique ability and build a team of people all focused on working within their own unique ability and helping you work within your unique ability, you're going to quickly see your business start to scale faster and faster and more organically than you previously could imagine. And I'm not overselling this here. So first of all, what is unique ability? We're definitely going to jump into that. This is a concept that is an extremely powerful business concept. One of the most powerful I've ever learned, and unsurprisingly, it is the exact opposite of virtually everything we were taught in school. Also, why should you consider bringing on a team member at all? Doesn't this slow you down? This is actually a really important question, especially in the real estate sector, where you can get a lot done just as a solopreneur. And then, of course, if you are going to create a company, if you are going to create an entrepreneurial company, and you're teaching your employees to think like entrepreneurs, won't they just leave you to start their own companies? This is a reasonable question, and it's something that can happen. So we're going to talk about all this stuff in this really interesting conversation. Now, a lot of you have been listening to this show for a long time, but I can tell by the download numbers that there is also a lot of new listeners that we're attracting on a weekly basis. The single easiest thing you can do to show your appreciation for the show is to leave a positive review in iTunes. It's the first thing that guests look at when they decide if they want to come on the program or not, and it's absolutely free to do so. So if you've enjoyed a couple of episodes and you've not yet left a review, make sure to go to the podcast app on your iPhone, select the Cashflow Connections Real Estate Podcast, scroll to the very bottom, and once you get all the way down there, click and leave a review. It sounds a lot harder than it is, but it really does make a huge difference. I've noticed it's much easier to get high-profile guests on the show now that we've had more than 100 reviews. And I think it's going to equally increase when we get 200 and 500. It's just going to get easier and easier. We currently have about 133. So let's keep chugging along. It's actually mutually beneficial because it makes it easier for us to get the kind of guests that we want to have conversations with so we can provide that awesome content for you. So I really appreciate it. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the episode. How's it going, everyone? Our guest for today is Shannon Waller, who is a coach, author, speaker, and innovator who has made her mark as the world's foremost expert in entrepreneurial teams. Shannon works with Strategic Coach, which is an entrepreneurial coaching company. She's the creator of the Entrepreneurial Team Program, which is a parallel program for team members of Strategic Coach that focuses on fostering a winning entrepreneurial attitude in its participants. She also co-authored the best-selling book, Unique Ability 2.0, and has written 2 books about entrepreneurial team success. The first being the Team Success Handbook, which details 12 actionable strategies for working successfully in an entrepreneurial company. And more recently, Shannon published Multiplication by Subtraction, a comprehensive guide to gracefully letting go of wrong-fit team members. And trust me, those books are jam-packed with content. Shannon, it's an honor to have you on. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much, Hunter. I'm super excited to be here, to be talking to you, and also to be talking about one of the things that I'm most passionate about. So appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, I want to start with the big picture. We're obviously going to get into the details of team building and unique ability, but, how were you originally drawn to Strategic Coach? And tell us a little bit about the program itself.
I'll give you a quick intro because I think it's kind of interesting. So when I first met Bob Smith and Dan Sullivan, co-founders of Strategic Coach and their husband and wife team, it was interesting because I worked for another company whose one of their lines of business was seminar rooms. So we would rent them out. And I was used to corporate trainers coming in and everyone's kind of sitting in their seat and they quietly say hello. And then it was interesting, a Strategic Coach group was coming in. I kind of thought they were the same. And people were like, oh, great. I do this, I do that. And by the way, my name's Bob. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a completely different type of human that I'm dealing with here. They were so gregarious and so out there. And then through various circumstances, they approached a friend of mine to see if he was interested in coming to work with them. And he told me, I'm like, ooh, see if I can come to that conversation too. So anyway, long story short, I ended up on board with Strategic Coach in July of 1991, just quite a while ago, and have been passionate about entrepreneurs and team members. And one of the things I recognized, because I was selling coach at the time, was that two things were happening. Entrepreneurs were calling me up and saying, can you please explain this to my team, Strategic Coach Program, because I apparently am not doing a good job. Or team members would call me up and say, what have you done to my entrepreneur? Because they're acting differently. So that's when I sort of identified a need for explaining this to teams and really helping entrepreneurs communicate what they're up to and the mindset. And that's where the rest of this, all of the stuff came from. So that's kind of how I got my start.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. And just for the listeners at home, so I actually am a client of Strategic Coach, and it's the first time that I've ever been in any sort of coaching program, because what you were speaking about earlier, especially in the real estate sector, there's so much ultra high price coaching programs where the people that are coaching maybe don't even have a lot of experience in real estate, because it's so lucrative. The business of real estate can be so lucrative that you can justify $50,000, $100,000 purchase prices. And then you get in there and the content is not really that dense. So I did a tremendous amount of research on this topic. I called referrals. I did the same kind of research as if like someone was applying for the NSA. That's like how I took this decision. And it was all started by Cameron Harold, who I know is a great client of yours that's referred many people. He was a guest on my show. Everything he does, I'm just all about. He's just got a great perspective on business and work-life balance and just seems to be an awesome person. And so that was the reason I was interested in it. And I ended up moving forward, and this is how this resulted in this interview. So, before we even get into all that though, obviously the sector of coaching itself is very large. So were you in the business of coaching prior to joining Strategic Coach, or talk us about that background?
Yeah, great question. I actually was in the training business. So the company I worked for was actually the training administration company, and our main client was General Motors of Canada. So we effectively ran their training programs across Canada. And I discovered I was better at selling it than administering it, which was one of my insights early on. And that's actually what gave me the confidence to kind of make the leap. And also I was just restless, and I knew I wanted to be in front of clients, not just behind a desk. So that was a big part of my impetus for that. Yeah. So, and my educational background is a ridiculously long degree title for a 3-year degree, but it was called Bachelor of Arts, Administrative and Commercial Studies, Social Organization and Human Relations. You can figure that out.
Wow.
But I've always been passionate about people in business and just keep working towards exactly who do I want my audience to be. And I find coaching much, much different than training. Training is me imparting or someone else imparting wisdom or knowledge into someone else's head. Coaching is very much, Dan Sullivan has always said, a really good coach asks really good questions. And I would much rather have a conversation where I'm pulling out that wisdom and helping collaborate and create it with someone. That's really much more where my unique ability lies.
Got it. So that's actually a good segue, because that's a term that I think is such an amazing term that I have used so many times since I've heard it for the first time through Strategic Coach. I definitely want to have the opportunity to focus on that. So what is that term you just used, unique ability? How does that play into the whole Strategic Coach program?
Oh, it's pretty much fundamental. Dan actually says if someone picked him up and transplanted him somewhere else and only gave him one concept with which to build or rebuild Strategic Coach, unique ability would be it, which is kind of fascinating. So if you take a look at all of your activities, here's the best way to get a perspective of it, from my opinion, is you take a look at all of your activities. And because coach really helps entrepreneurs simplify their thinking, their mindset, their activities, their behaviors, a lot of it is just acknowledging what's at the core, what's essential. And so if we take a look at all of our activities, there's some at which we are, frankly, if we're being truthful, incompetent. Or as I like to say, we put in the time and effort and we do not get the result. So that's the hard way. There's things at which we are competent, we're adequate, we're okay. We can do it with some training. That was me doing administration for a long time. Excellent is where you have superior skill, and that's just not your ego talking. Other people say, oh my gosh, you're amazing at this. The challenge, though, with our excellent abilities, a lot of people are trapped in this. I think this will resonate with people listening, is that we have a lot of superior skill. Again, other people's opinions, not just ours. But we may have had a passion for it at the beginning, but we don't now. The problem is there are a lot of external rewards, and in some high reward businesses like real estate, investment banking, some other things, we can get trapped because there are so many external benefits we get, but internally we don't love it. So that's where unique ability comes in. If you imagine this circle going in from the outside, the center core, which is the smallest circle, are those activities, those things that we not only have superior skill at, so we're excellent, but we also love them. This is where the word passion comes in. Your heart's engaged, your eyes light up when you talk about doing this sort of activity or operating this way. Also, there's never-ending improvement. You can always see room to get better because you love it. And it gives you energy. It doesn't drain you. And often it's a certain type of conversation, probably with a certain type of audience, is how that works. I love how Dan talks about it. He also has another way of talking about unique ability. It's when you're a hero to other people. So it's your passion, again, what you're good at and what you love to do. It's when you're a hero. It's also when there's a multiplier result. So when you do it, really good things cascade from that. It's not just a one-to-one return of energy. So unique ability has a lot of ways of getting at it and describing it, but it's at its essence, it's what you love to do and do best.
Awesome. And I just wanted to add something there because kind of as you were going through it. So I really like that passion, and also something I've heard kind of in your talks and also Dan Sullivan's talks is just because you're passionate about the lucrative component needs to be there at least. At least that's the good message that I've gotten as well. So like the example I like to give, I really love to work out. I mean, I absolutely love it. Like I've been going 6 times a week. That's something that I do regularly, but no one in their right mind would pay me a nickel to watch me work out or even talk about working out. I'm just not nearly on that level. So I kind of speak to, kind of that component of, making money out of your unique ability as opposed to just something that you like as like a passion, for example.
That's a great distinction. And sometimes people ask me, well, what if I love it, but I may not be very good at it?
Oh yeah, that's another one.
And I'm like, well, that's called a hobby.
Yeah.
I kind of joke that marketing for me is a hobby. I love it. I don't think I'm particularly good at, but I'm fascinated by it. There's other things I do, in my personal life that also I consider to be a hobby. I can love it. People have that sometimes about playing an instrument that just gives them great joy, but they're not going to join a band anytime soon or on the radio, but that's totally fine. But when those things coincide, when you're doing your superior skill and it creates value for others, to your point, has that multiplier impact, and you love it, that's a very, very cool sweet spot to be in. And then you can keep expanding it. And one of the elements of unique ability that I think Strategic Coach focuses on a little bit, but we keep it, growing this part, is who's your audience? Because they have to clap, they have to appreciate you. They have to be willing to pay you. They have to be willing to refer you. You have to get better as a result of working with them. So really knowing who the right audience is for your particular unique ability is the key to getting that return on your investment of time and energy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just that knowing that term unique ability in itself will kind of unlock a worldview that I think that if most entrepreneurs or just people in general start to really focus on, if they're in companies that allow them to have flexibility in terms of how they focus their time, or if they're in entrepreneurial companies, man, you really start to realize, number one, time starts flying by, and you have to actually be cautious about that. I mean, yesterday, I worked from 7:30 a.m. and then I did a live event after work that ended at 10. There was an hour drive home. So we got home at 11 p.m. So like a solid 15, 16 hour day. But it really wasn't that exhausting because it was in my unique ability. Now you have to be cautious about that if that starts to get in the way of the other parts of your life. But that's what you can really unlock when you're acting within that. The more percent of the time that you're acting within your unique ability, the more value you're bringing to your clients, which is really what the overall goal is. In fact, this concept is so strong. And this is when I always know that I want to have someone on. When I hear someone speak and I heard one of your interviews and I think just for a brief second, you feel that thing where you go, man, I don't want my competitors to find out about this. And then I go, oh man, I got to have her on so everyone can hear about this. Because the truth is, I want everyone to be acting in their unique ability because I want to buy the products and services that they could be making. It'd be great for like the economy and the life and just anyway. So a little bit of a tangent. So you've touched on it briefly, but I want to hear what your unique ability is, and then also how you identified that as you were working, in coach or otherwise.
Oh my gosh. Okay. How long do we have? A couple of things about that. One of them is that, Dan's talked about unique ability, and in the beginning of our book, we talk about how he discovered it. And it's an interesting story. He actually was working with the Canadian government. It was hired by a friend of his. It was during the year of the disabled, which is interesting. So he went across the country and interviewed 40 people, and he was a marketing guy. So he came at it from a kind of a different mindset. He had a one-page layout for every person with their picture and kind of did a summary. And what he discovered is that they may have certain physical or sometimes even mental constraints, but each of them, there were happy and unhappy people, same as every other part of the population, but every single one of them had something unique about them. And he went, oh, they're really not so different than the rest of us. Now, their disabilities might be a little bit more obvious than some other people's, but all of us have some things which frankly we're not very good at. And all of us also have abilities that are unique to us. And if we can focus in on and grow those, then we can maximize those. And that's how we're going to be happy. That's how we're going to make a contribution, all those great impacts. So he created a whole series of exercises. And if anyone checks out our knowledge product called Unique Ability 2.0, you'll see that there are several authors, one of whom is my sister. And my sister is someone who is brilliant at organizing things. And so she really put together a 6-step process to help people figure out their unique abilities. And that's how I have my beautiful one-page summary of kind of everything that's important to know about Shannon, should you be working with her. So that's really how I figured it out. So we have a one-sentence statement, which really pulls everything together. There's my 10 best unique ability habits. We're a big fan of profiles. So a starting point for people I would highly, highly, highly recommend is to do 2 different profiles. And to get at sort of the affective or, kind of desire part of you, your strengths from that point, I would highly recommend the Clifton Top 5 Strengths, which is available from Gallup. GallupStrengthsFinder.com is a great way to find that, or GallupStrengthsCenter.com. And just to do the top 5, or better yet, do all 34. And it puts language around those things that really are your strengths, latent or not. But I knew when I read them, I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And then I looked at them and went, oh, I actually do. And then I grew them. So StrengthsFinder is fantastic. And the other profile, which you're familiar with because you do as part of Strategic Coach, is the Kolbe profile. And Kolbe is KOLBE.com if you want to go check that out. And Kolbe profile measures your mental energy and how you strive, how you take action. It's not how well, that's your brain. It's not on what, because that's really what you care about. It's how you will do things. And it's incredibly accurate and very predictive and very reliable. It doesn't change over time. So we use the language from StrengthsFinder and Kolbe to help people put together their unique ability statements. So would it be, Tantra, do you want me to read my unique ability statement? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay, awesome. So this is me. So my unique ability is intuitively perceiving the essence of a situation, then innovating and compassionately communicating practical strategies to align people's thinking with what's real so that they're happy with themselves, maximizing their growth, working as a team, and fulfilling their purpose.
Boom.
So that's right. Thank you. That's really what I'm about. And it's kind of fun. I can look around my day, conversations, and every single aspect of that comes out in one way or another, throughout my day. And to your point about yesterday, it's energizing. It's not exhausting. I do have to remember to physically rest, and more sleep would probably be a good thing. But when I'm doing this, it's food. It's nourishing. It feeds me. And I can always find new ways to express it and get better at it. And I love curating information to make, I love those maximizer strategies that help people do this. So this is a fabulous encapsulation of me, and someone with different strengths, different Kolbe profile would show up very, very differently with different words. And that's what's so fun. It's incredibly personal to everyone who does it. Agreed.
And then those tools that you mentioned are also really powerful for introspective. Know thyself is really critical. And I think that's those tools are actually very accurate representations of things that you may even not know about yourself, even things that you wouldn't have an inkling about. But once you see them ironed out in a tool like this, you'll say, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And that clicks so much easier than my own perceptive of myself. Mm-hmm. It's pretty remarkable. Even for someone that takes knowing yourself seriously, such as myself, I got a lot of going through those processes. Now, some people may be listening to this and they can feel that anxiety building up because they're concerned that they haven't yet identified what they're super passionate about or what their unique ability is, let alone, where they should be focusing all their time, if they had their flexibility to do so. And when you're especially growing up, going to school, going to college, where it's such a systematized form of play within these rules and you're succeeding. And then you get out of that and everything is so different, virtually from A to Z, being successful in terms of, teamwork or learning skills, or as opposed to innovating new skills. So speak to what people can do to identify their passion and then later iron out what their unique ability is.
Perfect. And I think you've raised a really, really important point. And the word, we actually get a lot of, I would call it pushback, but anxiety about the word unique. Oh, I'm not unique. Everyone thinks of like Michelangelo or some great composer or someone who's completely different than anybody else. But the truth is we are all unique. Just simply check out your fingerprints and you'll know that. And then it's identifying it. And often people think it's this big external thing. It's actually often starts with the internal. And you said know thyself. And I'm like, yes, I'm cheering over here. I think that self-awareness is one of the most important things any human being can bring to a teamwork relationship. And so really appreciating that, okay, let me play around with this idea, even if we've all been trained. This is, to your point about universities and schools and families and business, how to fit in. We simply do not have this, we don't have the sensors tuned to what is unique about us. We're really tuned to how can we fit in, which is important, certainly in some levels. But if you're going to be fulfilled and happy and make a contribution, it's not going to happen just by fitting in. You're going to figure out what is my unique contribution. And that's why Kolbe is so useful. That's why Strength Finder is so useful, because it's kind of a signpost. It's like, oh, try this direction from how you answered the questions compared to, I think StrengthsFinder is up to roughly 14 million people who've done the StrengthsFinder profile. So there's a very large sample size for those people that care about that of people. And Kolbe's done over 1 million. So you are not alone. You're not doing some weird profile. And having the language in comparison to other people is so powerful. So hopefully that's really validated. That's a great, easy, I would say inexpensive way to start. And then again, pay attention to the subtleties. For instance, I know some people who are just brilliant at getting tasks done. They're really good at focus. I know people who have a ton of mental energy for fact-finding, researching, or better at organizing, which I do not have mental energy for that. I know people who are brilliant at the front of the room, not so good backstage. And you'll start to notice, oh, I really enjoy this situation. My talents and skills seem to be useful. So-and-so found that what I said was really helped them. Pay attention to those things. Look at those things you're like, oh my gosh, I could just do this all day. Or to your point yesterday, where you lost track of time. Just pay attention to that. We've been just simply taught to shift our attention, to how we fit in those things. But if you start to shift your attention to things that are fun, rewarding, fulfilling, make you smile, make your eyes light up, because that's what I look for when I'm talking to somebody. Where does their voice get, higher? When do their hands come into play? Where do their eyes light up? And then tapping into a passion. I have to find out whether or not they're any good at it.
Right.
That's part two, but at least I know their passion. So I think if you simply pay attention to that, and there is a little bit of faith, there's a little bit of trust that everyone is unique and has a unique contribution. But I think if we start to look at what are my unique abilities, or better yet, even what are the unique abilities of people around me? First of all, phenomenal way to look at your community and start to explore that. You'll start to see some wonderful differences. Sometimes they're nuanced, sometimes they're not. And you'll start to appreciate, oh, this is lying around. We just have not been paying attention to it. So it's there. But again, you just have to start noticing.
So when you're kind of going through this process, you start to feel like you may be hyper-focusing on some of your strengths. Mm-hmm. And that seems a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of the things that we've been taught growing up, especially in terms of, focusing on your weaknesses. That way the mean of your own output is basically increasing. So what are your thoughts on weaknesses, and what is your perspective on working on weaknesses as opposed to focusing on something that you're already have some advantage in?
That's a great question. Dan has a great expression. And when I first met him in 1991, I think he's been that long. He said, well, if you focus on your weaknesses, what you get after a long time are really strong weaknesses. And that sentence has always cracked me up, and it's true. Some of us have worked really long and hard and we have really strong weaknesses, but there's no innate charge. There's no innate energy, and we will only ever get so good. You cannot get unique. By the way, I'm also all about as StrengthsFinder talks about, I'm all about damage control. If there's something that I am quote unquote weak in that is sabotaging my strengths, yes, please go to work on that. Reading, writing, arithmetic, retrieval, force, the 4 R's in these days. All of those are kind of essential just to function successfully in society. So I'm not saying don't do those things, but there's a basic, much more basic than most people think, level of competence for a lot of things. But as soon as you've got that figured out, then go back to working on your strengths. And it really is about learning, where can technology and where can teamwork leverage you? I could do the setup for the studio and, the technology, and I could do it. It would take me 5 times long and might not turn out well rather than working with our phenomenal team here at Coach, particularly my fabulous audio editor, Willard, who, will just do it and just know exactly, what has to happen. It takes him a millionth of the time that it would me, so that I'm freed up to do what I'm better at. So it's really looking at not stepping on other people's abilities or talent or skills and appreciating where I can make my best contribution. Again, could I do those other things? Sure. I'm smart. I'm not stupid. I can probably figure it out. But if I've tried it a few times and it does not seem to be an innate capability and there's someone far more talented, that's just efficient. That's just smart. By the way, I want to mention what you talked about, if people are kind of focused on, it can feel weird to focus on your strengths because we're kind of taught that, we need the humility to focus in on our weaknesses. If you're not sure that you have a unique ability, then one of the first steps in our processes after you do the profiles is to send out a letter. And again, this might take a little bit of courage on some people's parts, is say, okay, I'm doing this process called unique ability, and I would really appreciate your feedback. What do you see as being my unique ability? And please do not ask, what are my non-unique abilities? You already know that. You don't need coaching on that. It's amazing. So if you're not trusting yourself, trust your people whose opinions you respect to give you that feedback, and they will tell you. And trust me, it'll be those things you take for granted. And again, we already know what those things we're not strong in. So sure, if they're causing you or someone else harm, do damage control, get okay or adequate at them, but then please go back to focusing on your strengths. One model that might be helpful here, if we think about who are some of the highest paid people in the world, it's athletes and entertainers. And we want their uniqueness. We pay large sums of money to watch people work because they have both a talent and a passion for what they're doing. We are watching unique ability, and the better someone is and the more they seem to love it, the more they're worth in the marketplace. So if we take that analogy and apply it to non-athletes and entertainers, it actually still holds. So that's another mindset that might help people wrap their head around this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that because I recently saw someone that posted on Facebook, which I don't suggest doing, but this person's personality kind of lends itself to allow for this. But he basically created a survey in SurveyMonkey, and it was basically rate me in terms of strengths and things that you like about me or things that I could work on about my personality for my birthday, right? So it was his birthday, and he said, I'm interested in learning more about myself and what other people's perspective are about me. And he posted a link to the survey on his status. And now, like I said, doing something like that publicly, unless the fins that you're going to see that, unless you're not super active on social media, you're not going to get a lot of haters in that instance. I would suggest likely emailing the people directly so that at least you can damage control that. Mm-hmm. But I actually thought that was pretty interesting because sometimes it does take a third party to identify, something like, by the way, you have incredible style. Right? Like something like that where it's like, oh yeah, that person with great style took it for granted. Maybe that person should be in, some sort of interior design, right? So if they're looking for something like that, just the fact that they have natural style would come very easily to them. But for other people, they always have that perspective of them. I just feel like, that's an example of how you could do that. So I wanted to transition into kind of talking about teams because I know that's a big part of what you've added in terms of value to Strategic Coach, and I'm a huge fan of one of the products you put out there. But I will say that when I started my business, my goal was really to just avoid bureaucracy at all costs. I heard some just horror stories that took place in the corporate world where I don't have a lot of experience at all in the corporate world, but I heard stories about people at the highest level, CFOs, COOs, who just basically, the type of companies where at the highest level, people would take the long walk around the porta potties, the cubicles, same thing, to go
Totally.
just to make it look like they're working, right? So just, that person's doing something, but they're just walking around aimlessly. Like that is the absolute opposite of everything that I'm all about. And so because of that, I was very hesitant to bring on additional team members. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the difference between what I'm having nightmares about and entrepreneurial team members and the amazing advantage you can get by building a true entrepreneurial team.
Well, you had let me know that, bureaucracy was something that just what you shared with me, that you really want to avoid people in general because of bureaucracy. And you are not alone, Hunter. This happens. And I kind of chuckled because I'm like, bureaucracy, by the way, is a 4-letter word at Strategic Coach. I mean, it is bad. There's pretty much, if you say something's bureaucratic, you've just given it the worst slam ever. So again, we're in that mindset too. But there is a happy medium. So entrepreneurial is on one end of the continuum and bureaucratic is at the other end. There is I don't want to say balance. There's a middle ground and there is a plus side of structure. Bureaucratic is the downside. Overstructured, no value creation, all process, no results. I've been there. I used one time in my early career as a teenager, I was a cashier as part of a union. So I had to punch a time clock. Mm-hmm. Hated that. Let me tell you. It was all about time and effort and not about results. So I can appreciate that. But there is an amount of people, and the only type of teamwork I'm ever interested in is unique ability teamwork. And so that's the entrepreneurial side. But not all entrepreneurial teamwork is unique ability teamwork. So I do definitely think that, most teamwork for a lot of people is they come in, they do their job, and they go home. Some people to a better, higher degree than others. But unique ability teamwork is where you bring in that passion, where you bring in the creativity when people are engaged. And that's what I'm really interested in facilitating and creating more of, and giving people language and distinctions and mindsets and worldviews that can facilitate that happening. So entrepreneurial teamwork is quite different than any kind of bureaucratic teamwork. And we have a fun model called front stage, backstage, which takes kind of the theater analogy metaphor into business, which I find incredibly useful. And, if something is all backstage, no front stage, most people liken that to be the DMV, mm-hmm. in which case it's all about them and not at all about you. But then you don't want to be all front stage, no backstage, because that is a street performer. That's a busker.
Right.
And so we want to kind of be somewhere in between where we have the right amount of people supporting us to do. So we're freed up to do what we're unique at, but we're also supported by people who are unique and passionate about in those areas that we're not. That is the happy medium. So it's definitely possible. Take some, mindset and wherewithal, but very doable. And it's two-sided. The team member has to have that mindset, which is, as you mentioned at the beginning, why I wrote the Team Success Handbook, because most team members don't have the distinction between entrepreneurial and bureaucratic. They just think of it as a job. But entrepreneurs don't have that mindset either. So I'm endeavoring to create a little bit of room for unique ability teamwork to live and breathe and be a part of people's daily experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really like how you said it's not about time and effort, which you hear so frequently. As long as you tried, it's all good, basically. Well, there's a different component of that. It's like, actually, it doesn't matter at all how hard you try. If you didn't get a good result, you shouldn't be doing that thing. Or we need to have a talk about adjusting the way that effort is being spent. It's like, if I spend 6 months knitting a sweater, no one will want it because I'm not a good knitter, right? Maybe my mom would want it, but other than that, pretty much no one. So my time is not best spent knitting, regardless of how much time or effort I put into it. So it's that's a kind of a play on the Marx labor theory of value, but we won't even go into that right now. So
I love it. Totally true. Well, and that's just it. And that's the big clash I see so much. In fact, that particular model is in the book. And this is the problem. So, team members, so you'll have an experience, you'll work together on a project, putting a deal together, and then for some reason it falls through. And the team members are like, oh, but we put in all this time and effort. And the entrepreneur is like, oh, but we didn't get the results. And there's this clash, this polarity. And truthfully, both are right. And when everyone can have the mindset of maximizing results and minimizing time and effort, then you've got an aligned team. And entrepreneurs are all in what we call the results economy. This is, entrepreneurs find security in opportunity. Whereas in the time and effort economy, which is, by the way, the only thing that's ever written about in the news, this is a guaranteed income or a job. That's what's perceived as being secure. Although if you take a look at how jobs are changing, I would have my doubts about that. But entrepreneurs are people who cross that risk line into the results economy, and people who work with entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial team members, need to be focused in that direction too. They may have one foot in the time and effort economy because they get paid a regular amount every 2 weeks, but their eyes have to be focused on results. Did we achieve that or not? And if we did, good. How can we do that again and make it even more efficient next time? Or if we didn't, what can we fix so that we can minimize time and effort and maximize results? It's a very powerful mindset. And that's certainly in different programs I've created for team members at Coach. Just this one way of looking at things, people go, oh, now I understand why my entrepreneur says this, that. Because before they were just focused on the processes because, again, that's what they were trained in. So very, very, very important shift in thinking.
Yeah, and a lot of this is documented in a tool that I recently found out that you're going to be sharing with the public, which I was shocked to hear given how incredible the content is, which is the Entrepreneurial Team video series. So tell us a little bit about that. I know we covered some of the high level stuff, but also, in terms of when people can access that, because I know a lot of people listening to this will be very interested.
Oh, I'm so excited. So I created let me get a little backstory. So originally when I was coaching team members on Strategic Coach Concepts, we have an entrepreneurial time system and particularly around unique ability. And I was coaching team members that work with our clients. I felt like it was sinking in about this much, like half an inch.
Right.
And it was like, okay, this is frustrating. I'm putting in the time and effort and I'm not getting the result. And then finally I realized there was a mindset that I needed to address. And so with our team figuring out, okay, what are the most successful team members at Coach do? And then looking at our clients' teams and who are the most successful team members, came up with 12 what I call entrepreneurial attitudes, ways of thinking and strategies that successful entrepreneurial team members have. So I created it into an exercise, and I coached that exercise for about 12 years. And then in the program, Dan said, everyone's got some wisdom. It'd be great to put that in the form of a book, usually a small one. It takes about an hour to read. And so me just hopefully being coachable went, oh, okay. And so I started to write a book for entrepreneurs and ended up writing a book on behalf of entrepreneurs for team members that went through these 12 entrepreneurial attitudes. And it was really fun. I just got to write what I had been coaching for 12 years. And I put that into a book format. And it was a big success. So that out of that, it's great to take the book back to your team, but sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of coaching that goes with it. And so ended up, I'd always wanted to do this. And someone from our marketing team, Corey, said, hey, Shan, this would be great to put into video format for marketing. Thank you for signing up for Strategic Coach. And it took a little longer than we thought, but I coached the book. So I coached it, and there's downloads and there's tools. So we have a video product now that's launching April the 25th. So excited. And so now it's only been up until now for the past few years, only available to Strategic Coach clients, but now it will be available to anyone who has an entrepreneurial team who wants this type of unique ability teamwork. And it really talks about the mindset that team members need to have and how they can have it. It's explaining you, the entrepreneur, to your team, and you don't have to do it, which is really nice. So my goal is to both leverage people, business owners, so they can be better understood and supported, but also help the people in your team be much more successful and happy and contributing and successful in their careers. So for me, it's kind of a win-win, and I'm absolutely over the moon excited that now it will be available to more people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I said, this added a tremendous amount of value to our firm. I sent it out to our team members, and we then had a call to review all the content. And it's one of those things, because obviously people that are listening to this interview can tell that you are communicating in such a way that makes people feel empowered. I can hear that you're smiling, and it's like there's a warm approach there, but sometimes it's hard to communicate things that are really, really important to your own team without, being like, look, this is like, I don't know. It's just interesting. It's a third party. It's not attack. It's clearly not an attack on them because you don't even know them. So it's really great to have a third party say, this is the type of business we're running without knowing anything personally about us or the people that are there or whether or not they've been able to deliver in the past. So it's a really cool tool to send out. And the fact that it's free is going to be really helpful to a lot of people. However,
well, yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when you get it from a third party, and, hopefully I'll say things that other people have heard before, and like, oh, yes, that's what that is. And so it's just very validating. And it is great to have, I've been studying entrepreneurial team members and entrepreneurs for close to 30 years. That's a long time. And so when people feel understood on both sides, so I appreciate you saying what you said, it's great because then they can up their level of teamwork, of contribution, and, back to my unique ability statement, feel much more fulfilled on both sides. And that's really the end game.
The challenge, though, or the potential challenge, something that starts to come up when you start empowering your team to such a degree, which I think is incredible, is that there can be a situation where if everyone is acting like the CEO, then you start to have too many chefs in the kitchen. At least that's the perspective on that could happen. What do you think, how do you mitigate? I'll give you a perfect example. In Strategic Coach, we talk about off days and buffer days and focus days. So without even going to the vocabulary, let's say that there is a day where you don't want to answer the phone at all. So if your team starts just creating those days on their own and implementing those days and you need to get in touch with those people, how do you mitigate some of those potential challenges that could arise from people taking that flexibility to that degree?
Great question. And that is probably the most common fear. It's like, well, if my team has an entrepreneurial attitude, won't they just go and become entrepreneurs? Which I think is, if put it this way, if you were in this position, that's what you would do, but you are 1/2 of 1% of the population. So the truth is, entrepreneurial team members don't. What they do want, though, is freedom to do their unique ability, to be part of a great team. I have yet to meet a team member that did not really appreciate clear vision and direction from the business owner. People love that. They love clarity about here's what we're up to, here's where we're going, and they love to be charged up with that energy. And then they want to be free to make their best contribution. If you create an environment like that, people stay and contribute for a very, very, very long time. Turnover drops like a stone. It's amazing. But how many people actually want to leave that amazing environment and go and take all of the risks of becoming an entrepreneur and deal with team members and finance and regulatory stuff by themselves? Very, very, very few. So I think it's a far less of a danger than most people think. I think I've actually I've coached thousands of team members, and I know of 2. One from our company and one from someone I coached that left to become a business owner themselves in all of those years. So very, Very small. I know it's kind of like, but what they love is they love the environment where they get to be entrepreneurial. And there's a massive difference between the two.
Totally.
Which I should probably talk more about. Now, going back to our time system, and if anyone's interested, the days are free days, focus days, and buffer days. It's interesting. Team members actually don't normally, they know they're much more conscious of constraints than most business owners are. And so what they know, though, is that how can I have some focused time? So unless someone's directly in sales, probably with you, they have focused time within their workday, and even having a little bit of protected thinking time to really drill down and not get distracted so they don't have to switch tasks is actually incredibly liberating for them. They're not necessarily looking for the 80% day that you or I might want to do. And free days, in our company, it's really important that if people take time off, they do it in conjunction in the bigger context of the team. Like, we can't have all of our sales team off on the same day. It'll be a bit of a disaster. And so, it's like, okay, guys, we can have a maximum number, like 2 or 3 people out at any one time. So if you're going to take a spontaneous free day, you need to look at the calendar, put your stuff in there, and make sure it works. And I find that people are very, very conscientious. If they appreciate the freedom that they have, they do not take advantage of those freedoms, if you want to call it that. And if they are people that take advantage, they're probably not great entrepreneurial team members, and that's when it becomes a multiplication by subtraction, which is my second book. So finding people with the right mindset is key, but oftentimes people so appreciate the environment that they're in that they actually don't want to jeopardize it, and they will help protect it, and they will use a form of positive peer pressure to make sure that everyone doesn't abuse those privileges. So in my experience, it's actually far less of a danger. I'm not going to say it's eliminated entirely. Some people are strange and do not great things. But at the same time, I would say 96% of people will absolutely love and protect and reinforce your strong entrepreneurial culture from harm. And they will not take advantage of it either because they value it so much.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I was recently at a conference where there was a panel where people were speaking about the road to $1 billion, where all of three of the operators up there were very getting close to owning $1 billion under management or so. And each one of them, the most important recurring theme was that they need to have great team members that demand excellence. Mm-hmm. So if you have a team member that you think is not carrying their weight, they probably should have been let go 6 months ago. And going through that process now as fast as possible in an appropriate way is really critical. So, and I know you have some work about that, and I don't think we have time to get into that topic today, but I know it's a really important part of, look, if everything you're trying to do is scale, you cannot scale a bad system. Similarly, you cannot build a team that has weak links because it will fall apart. The entire industry, the entire business itself is built on, those weak links can destroy what you're trying to build. It doesn't matter how good you are, how skilled you are. So, just an interesting tidbit. And maybe we'll have you on in the future to talk about the other book you wrote about, getting rid of those team members, because I definitely want to talk about that. Before we go though, there have been a lot of entrepreneurs that come to a strategic coach in really a form of entrepreneurial poverty, in the sense that regardless of their income level, regardless of their perceived financial success, they don't really have a life outside of work, or even within work. It's not something that most people would define as having a life. What do you think the most direct way to resolve a lot of that is? What are some of the potholes that entrepreneurs put themselves in that result in that, and how can that be avoided? I know it's a huge question. It's the whole point of Strategic Coach, but I definitely wanted to give you the opportunity to touch on that before we jumped off.
First of all, the term entrepreneurial poverty, I just wrote that down. That's a genius term, by the way. And it's so true. And it's interesting. A client of ours just wrote this interesting book called The Success Lie. It just came out in April. And, everyone's striving for success, and they get there and they're like, oh, this is hard. This is not fun. I have no life. I'm on my third family, that kind of thing. And she talks about really designing your life for significance, not just success. What's personally meaningful and of value to you? And you're right, that is the entire purpose, the raison d'etre of Strategic Coach, is to really help people be successful, but also have fun doing it. And in our purpose statement, it's all about entrepreneurial freedom and happiness and the ways to do that. So a lot of it is, entrepreneurial poverty comes from a mindset of scarcity. There isn't enough time. There aren't enough clients. I don't have enough resources. There aren't enough good people out there. If you listen for it, you will absolutely hear all of the not enough statements. And sometimes people feel like they're not enough for the challenges. There's a mind shift to one of abundance, where it's like, okay, what am I starting with? And that's where narrowing things down to unique ability, narrowing things down to things that you're doing just being your unique ability, and narrowing your activities on your focused days to be your top 3 money-making activities, and really making sure that you have a unique ability team around you. Those are some of our strategies for turning that around. And one, probably just to give people a really practical action step, because I can feel the pain of the entrepreneurial poverty, is a lot of people the reason why they're feeling so crunched is because they're exhausted. And if I don't know any business enterprise of any kind right now that does not require creativity and ability to be in relationship and communication with people, but it's really hard to do that when you're tired. One of my favorite quotes from Dan is, he says, have you ever noticed that when you get tired, other people get stupid? So if people around you are looking like complete and total idiots, it may not be them. So the first thing would be to do is to actually block off one really great free day. And a free day is 24 hours midnight to midnight, during which you do absolutely no work. And for some people, it's going to feel like they're pulling out the IV and they might get the shakes. But it's powerful when you actually rest, when you do activities that are rejuvenating for you, because all of a sudden you get restored. All of the stuff that your brain was trying to process, happens in the back, and then you come back the next day to your business, to your deal, like, oh, it's an approach that we could take. So really, we find that one of the most important things, the way that we create some freedom for entrepreneurs who are experiencing that poverty, is to actually, and we do this, as you know, in Workshop 1, is really to start taking some time off the board to just step away from your business. And that's the only way you're going to have what we call a self-managing company, is if it can run without you there. But again, it comes from a bit of you have to get out of the fear a little bit in order to be able to do that. But once you do, it's kind of amazing. You attract great people. You put in place great systems. You yourself are at your very, very best, and again, making your best contribution. So it's really about narrowing things down. Instead of trying to do everything, that's how you're going to hit what we call a ceiling of complexity. It's really about narrowing down those things to those few activities that you love to do, you're best at, with your best audience, surrounded by a great team, and taking them away from your business so you can come back refreshed. Some of the ways that I think that I know to help people escape that entrepreneurial poverty. But again, what a powerful term.
Well, yeah, I can't take credit for it. It's actually from someone named Michael Michalowicz, who's the author of Clockwork, which, by the way, is very much aligned with the entire strategic coach worldview. The actual name is Clockwork: How to Design a Business That Runs for Itself. It's incredibly the overlap is really significant there. All right, Shannon. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. We've obviously touched on a ton of big topics. That last one in particular is just something that we could write books and books and books on. So I really appreciate it. Before we jump off, though, let the listeners know how they can find out more about Strategic Coach and more about you.
Fantastic. I'd love to. So if you want to check out Strategic Coach, and by the way, you're the second person to recommend Clockwork in a week, so I'll be grabbing that really soon.
All right.
So again, for a practical coaching program and a great community, strategiccoach.com. Lots of great webinars. You'll see me, as along with Dan and some of our other talented team members. So check us out. Just amazing. We're in our 30th year now. So strategiccoach.com is a place to get not only more about the program, but just a ton of entrepreneurial resources. You might be interested in Dan's and my Inside Strategic Coach podcast, or Dan's got about 9 podcasts now, I think, going. So check him out on different places. And then my passion, as you know, is team success. And then also, if you just want to leave some information, even just email us at questions@strategiccoach.com. I can let you know as we're launching the Team Success video series to the world. It's only free for clients right now. Still have to pay for it if you're not a client, but it is included with Strategic Coach. So I could love to put people on the list if that's something you want to learn more about.
Awesome. So we'll link to that in the show notes page. Shannon, thanks again.
My pleasure, Hunter. Thank you. Great conversation.
All right, listeners, thanks for checking out the episode. As always, the contact information for our guest will be available in the show notes page, which is hosted on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Don't forget, if you want access to some of the free goodies that I'm talking about at the beginning of these episodes, like free ebooks, weekly investor emails, and articles about some of the most important investment-related topics, make sure that you have created an account with CFC, because this stuff is automatically available. You can do this by going to cashflowconnections.com and signing up as an accredited investor. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hunterthompson@cashflowconnections.com. Thanks again.